Shedeur Sanders walked into this game knowing all eyes were on him. But what unfolded wasn't just about a quarterback under the spotlight. It was about a young player being left out to dry. Each time Sanders extended plays or delivered strikes, his receivers, especially Jeudy, failed to capitalize. With every drop pass and blown route, the pressure mounted, not just from the defense, but from within his own team. It wasn't just a tough game. It was a case study in how not to support a developing quarterback.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
There's a tendency to pin a team's failure on the player touching the ball the most, but in this case, that narrative falls apart. Sanders kept his cool in chaos, showcasing decision-making beyond his years. The failures that defined his performance weren't his. They were the result of systemic dysfunction, from an unresponsive coaching staff to teammates who couldn't meet the moment. This wasn't a collapse by a young quarterback. It was a collapse around one. You could feel the frustration boiling over before the game even ended. The Cleveland Browns had just wrapped up a brutal loss to the Chicago Bears, but it wasn't a score that had fans lighting up message boards and timelines. It was the absolute breakdown in execution. All eyes turned not to the young quarterback learning the ropes, but to Jeudy, the veteran wide receiver who somehow managed to undermine nearly every glimmer of hope Shedeur Sanders tried to create. Jeudy's drops weren't just inconvenient. They were momentum killers. In the red zone, in key third downs, in drive-sustaining situations, time after time, the ball would hit his hands and somehow still end up on the turf. Fans weren't just annoyed, they were livid. Because this wasn't about one bad game. It was about a pattern, and this game pushed it into the spotlight. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders was catching blame he didn't earn. Yes, he threw 3 interceptions. But every replay told the same story. Pressured snap, broken protection, receivers not finishing routes or flat-out dropping catchable balls. Sanders wasn't perfect, but he was standing tall in a storm. He kept firing, kept looking for plays downfield, kept moving the chains when he could. You could see flashes, deep balls with NFL-caliber zip, smart reads and chaos. And still, somehow, the narrative painted him as a scapegoat. This is what happens when the infrastructure fails around a young quarterback. When the line doesn't hold, when the receivers aren't dependable, when the coaching staff refuses to adjust, it's the rookie who gets buried in the fallout. Sanders didn't get outplayed. He got abandoned. And then there's Kevin Stefanski. If the game plan looked like it was scribbled on a napkin during warm-ups, that's because it basically was no rhythm, no real adjustment, a run-first obsession, despite no push from the line. Stefanski stuck to his usual conservative approach, even as the game begged for creativity. When Sanders needed help, he got silence. It wasn't just stubborn, it was negligent. The Bears' defense wasn't dominant. But when you make 0 changes and leave your quarterback to scramble for survival, you're handing the game away. The lack of motion, quick passes, or protection shifts, that's not development. That's sabotage. And with the offensive line, disaster. 2 designed runs the entire game went to Sanders, and somehow he still finished as the leading rusher. That's not talent shining. It's a red flag. Your quarterback should never be your most effective runner on busted plays. Dylan Gabriel was barely a factor in the blocking scheme, and with the line collapsing before Sanders could even scan his reads, mistakes were inevitable. What should have been a growth opportunity turned into damage control. Every snap looked like a jailbreak. There was no trust, no control, just desperation, and still, Sanders didn't fold. That alone should have said enough. When Sanders faced the press post-game, you wouldn't have blamed him for throwing the team under the bus. But he didn't. He stood there, owned the interceptions, talked about execution, and took the heat. Composed, direct, even encouraging. And still, the noise came for him. Fans who had watched every snap knew better. They saw the bullet throws in tight windows, the smart scrambles, the leadership in the huddle. But national commentators latched onto the picks and ignored everything else. Sanders wasn't protected on the field or off it, and it's exhausting watching history repeat itself for another young QB in a dysfunctional one. Back to Jeudy, because let's be honest, This one's on him too. You can't drop multiple passes, miss your depth on routes, and expect no consequences. At one point, it felt like Sanders was throwing to a ghost. The timing was off, the chemistry non-existent, and Jeudy looked completely out of sync. Not just off, but uninterested. The body language? Awful. The sideline vibe? Worse. Teammates weren't rallying, they were retreating. Jeudy's misfires didn't just cost yards, they shattered confidence. Every drop fed the Bears' momentum, drained Sanders' momentum, and burned another shot at a rhythm. Post-game, Stefanski dodged accountability like a pro. Asked about the play calling, he gave nothing. No acknowledgement of the failure to adjust. No recognition of how the offense collapsed. He stood by the decisions, even the bad ones. That's the kind of leadership that leaves players out to dry. There was no recognition of the pressure Sanders faced, no mention of Jeudy's performance, no clarity on whether changes were coming, just more coach speak and deflection. When your staff won't own its mistakes, the locker room feels it. That's how resentment brews and how locker rooms splinter. Dillon Gabriel's role might have been smaller in the stat sheet, but the blocking failures exposed more than just line weakness. Miscommunication, misassignments, and blown protections made every dropback an uphill battle. The Bears didn't have to do anything fancy. Just send pressure and watch the Browns fall apart. It's one thing for a young quarterback to have a rough outing. It's another to force him into high-risk plays over and over without adapting. That's not game experience. It's sabotage disguised as opportunity. And Gabriel, while talented, wasn't picking up the slack. Through it all, Sanders still found a way to show flashes. A tight window throw into triple coverage that somehow hit the receiver's hands. A gutsy rollout on 3rd and long that turned into a first. You could see it. The talent's real. But raw talent can't overcome broken support systems. The mistakes he did make, they came from overcompensating. Forcing passes to keep the game alive. Trying to make something from nothing. It wasn't reckless. It was survival. And that's the sad part. The raw ability is there. But week after week, it's being drowned by dysfunction. The Browns can't keep pretending this is sustainable. Stefanski's system clearly doesn't support young quarterbacks. The lack of identity on offense, the refusal to modernize play calling, the mismanagement of skilled players. It's all circling the drain. And the worst part? No one seems willing to acknowledge it publicly. If the front office doesn't shake things up, this cycle will keep repeating. Quarterbacks thrown into the fire, receivers failing to deliver, coaches refusing to adapt, and fans stuck watching another talent waste away. Sanders doesn't need saving. He needs structure. And if the Browns can't provide that, they're setting him up to... What makes this even more frustrating is that Sanders is clearly doing his part. He's making throws that veteran QBs struggle to hit. He's hanging in the pocket, even when it's crumbling around him. He's not flinching when blitzers fly in untouched. But the optics don't favor nuance. 3 picks on paper look like a disaster. What they don't show is that those throws were often made under duress, on broken plays, or after receivers let him down. One interception was tipped off a drop pass from, you guessed it, Jerry Jeudy. Another came after a miscommunication where the receiver never turned around. The third? A desperation shot on 4th down with no protection, and the clock bleeding out. None of those scream reckless rookie. They scream kid with no lifeline trying to make something won. Jeudy, on the other hand, played like a man checked out. This isn't some hot take. It's what the tape shows. Late hands, lazy routes, zero fight for contested catches. And this isn't the first time it happened. Fans have been watching it for weeks. But this was the first time it hurt in full view. A nationally watched game. A young QB needing support, and the guy paid to be the security blanket just disappeared. And no, it's not just 1 or 2 drops. It's the timing, the context. 3rd and long, Sanders delivers a clean strike, and Jeudy can't finish it. Drive dead. Sanders hangs in and fires a dart across the middle. Slips right through Jeudy's arms. Crowd groans. You can feel the momentum evaporate every... And what does the coaching staff do in response? Nothing. No accountability. No in-game corrections. No visible reaction. Stefanski's entire sideline demeanor looked like a man watching a different game. And maybe he was, because anyone watching closely saw the offense unravel in real time. The worst part? He doubled down after the game, said the team executed well in spots, and that Sanders needs to clean some things up. No mention of the receivers. No word on protection. Not even a hint of the glaring issues everyone else saw. It's the kind of quote that makes you wonder if leadership even has a pulse. Contrast that with Sanders in the post-game presser. Straight-faced. No finger-pointing. No deflection. He talked about being better. Talked about taking care of the ball. But you could see it. The weight. The kind of pressure that builds when you're trying to lead, but nobody's following. When you're expected to carry the team, but no one's lifting with you. And somehow, he still held his composure. That's the part fans respected. Because it's not just about what happens on the field. It's how you carry the setbacks. Sanders didn't flinch, even when the blame game started. That says more than a box score ever could. Meanwhile, Dillon Gabriel's role in this mess can't be ignored either. He's not the target of fan frustration like Jeudy, but his lapses mattered. Missed blocks, mistimed protections, and absolutely no help picking up blitzes. It wasn't all on him, but added to the avalanche. Sanders didn't even have time for progressions half the time. Snap, pressure. Snap, scramble. Snap, sack. When that's your rhythm, nothing gets built. No flow. No rhythm. Just chaos. And still, somehow, Sanders managed to find guys downfield when they caught the ball. Even on the busted plays, Sanders looked like the one guy trying to create. A back foot throw here, a rollout dime there. The kind of stuff that doesn't just show skill, it shows heart. But how long can that last before frustration kicks in? How many perfect throws can you make, only have them dropped or called back on a holding flag? The body language told the story. Sanders wasn't angry, but he was exhausted. Late in the fourth, after another blown assignment left him scrambling, he just stood there for a second after play. No yelling, no panic, just stillness. That kind of silence says one. And still, Jeudy played on. Not benched, not rotated out, not even pulled aside for a chat on the sideline. That's what blew fans' minds. You've got a receiver actively sabotaging drives, and the coaches just roll with it. If Sanders had made the same number of mistakes, he would have been crucified. The double standard is impossible to ignore. Veterans get leeway. Rookies get heat. But this wasn't a small error. Jeudy's drops and misassignments were pivotal. They flipped the field. They flipped the game. And nobody said a word about it. Accountability can't be optional if you're trying to win. Which brings everything back to coaching. Stefanski's refusal to adapt isn't new, but it's become unsustainable. You can't call the same vanilla run plays on early downs and then expect magic on third and long. And you can't leave your rookie quarterback to improvise every other snap and call it development. There was no up-tempo adjustment, no extra protection schemes, no use of motion or misdirection to help Sanders identify coverages. Just the same static offense getting swallowed whole. And yet, somehow, Sanders was the only one getting grilled in the post-game chatter. At some point, this becomes a question of direction. What exactly are the Browns trying to build? Because if you've got a young quarterback showing flashes, the logical move is to support him, scheme around his strengths, give him short throws, quick reads, max protect. Instead, they're doing the opposite. Dillon Gabriel, for all his upside, looked lost in the blocking scheme. There was no rhythm in the run game, and without that, everything else crumbled. Defenses knew what was coming, and the Browns had no counterpunch. That's not a quarterback problem. That's a structural collapse. So where does that leave Shedeur Sanders? Caught between potential and dysfunction. He's clearly not the issue, but the longer this continues, the more damage gets done. And it's not just physical, it's mental. Quarterbacks break when they're asked to do everything with nothing. And right now, that's what this feels like. A young star in the making, surrounded by chaos, held back by veterans who aren't delivering, and coaches who won't adjust. If that doesn't change, and soon, this could spiral, not because Sanders isn't ready, but because no one around him is. And through all of this, Sanders is still being asked to be the face, the one who steps to the mic, the one who answers for everyone else's mistakes. When the camera's rolling and the questions start flying, it's not the receivers or the O-line being grilled. It's him. And yet, there he is again, calm, professional, taking the blame for things outside his control. That kind of poise under pressure is rare, especially in a rookie, but it shouldn't be confused for acceptance. There's only so long a young quarterback can keep eating blame without the front office stepping in and demanding better support. And let's be real, this isn't about protecting egos. It's about protecting your one. The fact that Jerry Jeudy hasn't faced any public accountability is baffling. Not even a subtle mention in post-game interviews. No coaches highlighting his drops. No reporters pushing back. Just silence. Meanwhile, every botched pass becomes a strike against Sanders in the court of public opinion. Jeudy is supposed to be a reliable target, a veteran, someone who helps develop a young quarterback, not one who drags him down. And yet, when it counted most, he vanished, physically on the field, but mentally checked out. No urgency, no intensity, just blank stares and jog. Kevin Stefanski can't keep hiding behind vague coach speak. At a certain point, someone has to say what we're all seeing. The offense is broken. The game plans are stale. The players look confused, and the communication is all over the place. And when the same problems keep repeating, that's not bad luck. That's bad leadership. You can't talk about execution without also talking about preparation. You can't keep pushing the idea that we just need to clean things up when there's no evidence of progress. What's actually being cleaned? The same breakdowns are happening every week. And somehow, the only person consistently called out is the quarterback. It's exhausting watching this play out, especially when you see how hard Sanders is trying to push through it. The effort is there. The fire is there. But the support isn't. And what's worse, you can almost see him internalizing the blame, adjusting his game in real time to overcompensate. He starts holding the ball too long, trying to make the perfect read. He hesitates before pulling the trigger because he doesn't trust his receivers to make the play. That's how mistakes start to compound. And instead of giving him more tools, more help, more structure, they just tell him to do better. Let's talk about the ripple effect of a receiver like Jeudy underperforming. It's not just about the drops. It's about what it does to an offense's rhythm. Drive stall, confidence dips, and suddenly the whole playbook feels off limits. How do you call aggressive plays when your WR1 can't secure a slant? And what kind of message does it send to the rest of the roster when there's no accountability? If the team leaders can win big moments and face zero consequences, how do you expect rookies or fringe players to stay motivated? Culture starts to erode when performance stops. This isn't just about one game anymore. It's about a pattern. Stefanski has had multiple seasons to get this right. And yet here we are again. Confused offense, wasted talent. A young QB thrown into the fire with no extinguisher in sight. The system doesn't flex. It doesn't adjust. It just crumbles under pressure. And look, this isn't about calling for heads mid-season. But let's not pretend it's working. The decisions being made on the sideline are actively hurting the team. You got a weapon in Sanders, a guy with clear tools and upside, and instead of maximizing that, the staff is burying it under bad habits and worse strategy. It doesn't help that the run game is completely non-existent. When Dillon Gabriel lined up, it was clear he wasn't getting much help either. Blocking assignments were blown, and defenders came free like it was a walkthrough. And yet, somehow, the coaching staff kept pretending the run game was a viable option. This forces Sanders into situations he's not supposed to be in yet. Third and longs, broken pockets, constant pressure. That's not how you develop a quarterback. That's how you destroy one. And Gabriel, as versatile as he is, can't be expected to fix a scheme problem just by showing up. And yet, Sanders kept grinding. You saw it late in the third quarter. He gets hit hard on a rollout, scrambles to his feet, and walks back to the huddle like nothing happened. No drama. No panic. Just focus. He's trying to lead through the chaos, trying to hold the team together when everything else is falling apart. That kind of resilience is rare, and it's being wasted. Because when he finally does put together a drive, when he finally gets the team moving, it falls apart due to a drop or a penalty or a missed block. And each time, you can see a little more of the wind come out as one. Jeudy had a chance to redeem himself in the fourth. Short route, middle of the field, wide open. Sanders hit him in stride, perfect placement. And Jeudy just dropped it again. At this point, fans in the stadium didn't even boo. They just sighed. That was the story of the day. Hope, then collapse. And yet, Stefanski kept him on the field, kept targeting him, kept pretending he was still the guy. It felt delusional. And it put even more unnecessary pressure on Sanders, who now had to keep trusting a target who hadn't earned that trust once all. By the end of the game, the Browns looked like a team that didn't believe in itself. No urgency, no spark. The sideline was flat. The play calling remained conservative, even when trailing. It was like Stefanski had already accepted the outcome before the fourth quarter even started. And in the middle of it all stood Sanders, still trying, still stepping up, still delivering dimes to receivers who couldn't finish. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even pretty. But it was effort, and it was real, which is more than you can say for half the team that day. There's something brutal about watching a quarterback do everything right and still lose. That was Shedeur Sanders in this game. Every time he made a play, it felt like someone else was there to undo it. A missed block, a drop, a penalty. The mistakes piled up like clockwork. And yet, he never checked out. That's the part that should scare opposing teams long term. Because when a guy keeps showing up, even after he's been let down all game, that's not just talent. That's leadership. Sanders is still developing, still figuring out the speed, the windows, the timing. But you can't teach the composure he's showing. You can't coach grit like that. That's earned through one. Meanwhile, the optics on Jerry Jeudy couldn't be worse. No fire, no urgency, and zero self-awareness. Body language says everything in these games. And Jeudy looked like he wanted no part of the responsibility. The more pressure built, the less he delivered. And when that becomes a pattern, how do you fix that mid-season? It's not just hurting Sanders anymore. It's affecting the entire team dynamic. If you're a young QB looking for chemistry, how do you build that with a guy who won't meet you halfway? One great route doesn't erase 5 drive-killing mistakes. And right now, Jeudy's stacking those at a dangerous. The coaching staff needs to wake up. Stefanski can't keep deflecting questions and calling it part of the process. The process is failing. The team is regressing. And this wasn't supposed to be a rebuild year. It was supposed to be a turning point. Instead, it's turning into a cycle. The quarterback has shown enough to build around. But if they don't start protecting him, schematically, physically, and publicly, it won't matter. Confidence cracks over time. Talent stalls without growth. And fans are already seeing what happens when leadership refuses to adjust. The wrong guys get blamed. As Sanders walked off the podium post-game, you could see it. He wasn't angry. He wasn't broken. He was just carrying too much. And still, no finger-pointing. No excuses. That's rare. That's a trait you build a franchise around, if you're smart enough to notice it in time. So, what's next for the Browns? That depends entirely on whether this coaching staff can take a long, honest look at itself. Because the quarterback isn't the problem. The system is. And if that doesn't change, this won't be the last time fans are left wondering why their best player is paying the price for everyone else's failures. If you've been screaming at your screen the same way we have, drop your thoughts below. Who deserves more blame here? And if you're tired of watching talent get wasted by bad schemes, you know what to do, like share and subscribe so we can keep breaking it all down without holding back.